The paintings develop quite slowly usually. Usually I'll have an idea and sit with it for a couple years maybe, or a year, unless there's something that happens that feels like it's a bit more urgent and I feel a lot more committed to it, and then I'll follow it up much quicker. Otherwise, once I decide on an idea and it gains momentum, I'll start making drawings. I'll start doing some research into it. If there's a particular event that's happened, I'll research it. I'll look into different images and things that are on social media, or I'll look through my archive of drawings and see if there are images that I've been working with that fit that idea. And then from that, I'll start putting together different compositions through the drawings and slowly figure out the size of the painting, the different elements that I want to contradict the story sometimes if that's necessary, the different art historical references that fit, and then ultimately there's the cloth which will sometimes dictate different parts of the composition. So if there's a particularly textured or wrinkled part of the cloth, it can affect what goes in that particular part of the painting. And then of course you have colour and reference to place, and the subject will often push the colour in a particular way, or will ask for the painting to be worked on more or less depending on what it needs. So as most of, or almost all of my paintings are based on subjects that are in East Africa, I spend quite a lot of time out there, mainly to do drawings. So a lot of the drawings will be from life. They'll be from either people will sit for me, or I'll spend a lot of time traveling around the country to particular places that I want to incorporate in the paintings, or particular landscapes. And when I'm there, I'll make drawings from life. Then I'll go back to the studio in Nairobi, where again I'll work on maybe more images that are based on things in social media or popular culture. So like either music videos or other images you can find on Twitter, or anything that helps really. Then I rarely paint. At the moment, I rarely paint when I'm in Kenya. It's just more gathering ideas and developing the themes for up-and-coming shows and new bodies of work. Maybe I'll have a couple months out there to prepare stuff for a new body of work, and then I'll come back to London and spend my time when I'm in London mainly making the paintings. It's an interesting setup because you do end up with a lot of distance from the subject, which changes my relationship to what I'm making, and subsequently, like sometimes I'll be kind of energized about a particular aspect of the new body of work that when I have a bit of distance it loses its interest, and other elements of the work come to the surface and become more important. So then once I'm in London, I spend most of my time in the studio just making the paintings. I'll work on several paintings at once. Again, it's just a way of giving me time to digest the marks that I do make, the images that I make, and how they all play off each other. So often a decision in one painting will be because of a decision in another, as opposed to specifically what that painting needed, which means that the paintings have a particular dynamic when they are together, and that for me is quite important, how the paintings react off each other and the way that different images influence other paintings. So the bark has been it's really opened up my painting practice in the sense that it's forced me to change how I paint, to incorporate the surface into the work, which completely destabilizes everything that I did before. It's a pretty extraordinary material in that it's made from the bark of a Lubugo tree, and that process is several hundred years old. So the process starts by scraping the skin of the tree off. This then exposes what will be the surface of the cloth. After that, a shapen machete is used to score down the outside of the bark, only going in sort of a centimetre or 2 centimetres, so it doesn't damage the inner bark of the tree, which would then kill the tree. So it's very precise. Once they do that, they use like a part of the stalk of a banana tree, to run up the scored line, and this slowly peels away the outer bark from the inner bark of the tree. The reason they use the banana leaf is that it doesn't cut into the second bark. This means that the bark keeps doing what it does and keeps the tree alive, and it doesn't damage it in any way. Once they've scored and peeled off the bark, they'll very carefully look for any knots where the bark stuck onto the inner bark, and again slowly prise the bark off, not to damage the tree itself. Then the whole of the bark eventually comes off, and they'll cut it, ring the top of it, so it just comes off the tree. After this, the guys who do this wipe their sweat along the whole of the bark with a banana leaf, and then they wrap the tree with wet banana leaves so that it's protected from all the elements. And by the time that the leaves dry off and fall off, the bark would have regrown, and it would be strong enough to withstand wind, rain, sun without killing the tree. The bark itself is then taken, laid flat on the ground. Dried banana leaves are laid on top of it. They're lit, so it very lightly singes the top of the bark. This then changes the color, so you end up with a two-tone cloth. On the top, it's a little bit darker, and underneath, it's kind of a paler sienna color. The bark is then washed and soaked, and any of the burnt bits of the bark are wiped and rubbed off. After this means that the bark is a little bit more flexible. So it's then taken to a little shed where the guys will sit and beat it with a mallet that looks a little bit like a meat tenderizer. This goes on for hours. It takes probably about 5 or 6 hours of beating the bark for it to then soften and become a cloth. The cloth is then laid out in the sun and dried. The drying is over about 2 weeks. Once that's done, the bark is ready, basically. Usually the bark would be used as a burial shroud. So the Buganda, who are the main tribe in Uganda, and they're the ones that produce the bark, will bury their dead in the cloth, and they also would use it for major ceremonies. They'll often wear it. I came across the cloth in a tourist stall, and it was being used as a placemat. And it was only after looking into how I could find this that I came across this extraordinary process. And that now is the basis for all of the paintings. And in my mind, what it does is locate the work very specifically in that part of the world. And not only that, it puts it within a longer historical context of cultural production. And this was incredibly important because ultimately they're paintings, and paintings' main history, and the one that I look at and draw from the most, is a Western art history. And it was important for me to be able to locate both the history of the work and the current cultural references in East Africa.